This is a Big Mac, and this is a Big King. These are essentially the same burger, but almost everyone would agree that the Big Mac, which came out 32 years prior, is the more iconic burger, while the Big King, despite arguably tasting better, is just a sad ripoff. In the world of superheroes, we often see characters between the big two companies that are way too similar to each other for that to be more than just a coincidence. Today we count down the top 10 examples of this and decide once and for all who ripped off who. What's up, everybody? My name is Matt, often called Big Nerdy. Together, we are the NWO, the Nerd World Order, and this is Nerdzoic. If this is your first time here, welcome. I created Nerdzoic to share my love of action figures as well as the various fandoms they represent. And this ended up spinning off into an online toy store that my wife and I operate out of our basement/warehouse. We think that toys are the best way to escape from life's chaos when you need to unplug. Almost like some type of nerd therapy, they give us happiness and inner peace and bring us back to a more simpler time. They allow us to relive our childhood and bring back feelings of being young, innocent, carefree, and safe. Now for this list, there's no honorable mentions, but there are a couple mentions, I guess. First, the not on this list because it makes no sense. And that would be Batman and Moon Knight. They're both rich, both rely on fear and technology and intimidation, but that's not that much in common. I see way more similarities between Batman and Iron Man, actually. They're both rich, no supernatural powers, no abilities, they rely on tech, they're brilliant creators, playboy, philanthropists, millionaires, yeah, you get it, borderline narcissists, I could go on. Then we have the not on this list because it's kind of meant to be a ripoff, thanks Rob Liefeld, and that is the Deadpool Wade Wilson with the Slade Wilson of Deathstroke. And I also left off any characters that were created long before DC or Marvel. We're talking Ares, we're talking Hercules, we're talking Zeus, and probably like a bunch of other mythological things I can't think of right now. With all that out of the way, it's time to go to the top 10. Coming in at number 10 is Black Cat and Catwoman. These two have a ton in common. They're both based on cats, obviously. Both seem to be sort of an anti-hero type where they started off as a bad guy and then became a cool love interest for our main heroes. Catwoman never has any powers, but Black Cat sort of does sometimes. More on that in a minute. And both are generally pretty easy on the eyes. On the Marvel side is Black Cat, aka Felicia Hardy. She first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man number 194 back in 1979. Hardy is the daughter of a professional thief, and a sexual assault at school motivated her to create this alter ego. She's Spider-Man's on-again, off-again love interest, and often usually a villain. As I alluded to a moment ago, Black Cat has no superpowers at first. She's just a really good burglar. But then she's tricked by the Kingpin to undergo an experiment where she gained superpowers that gave her enemies bad luck. That's a crappy superpower, but whatever. Eventually enter Doctor Strange. He came in, he reversed the bad luck power and gave her the more commonly known powers that she has of strength and retractable claws. So to sum up, black suit, claws, feline, not related to Black Panther. How does Spider-Man always get the best looking women? Mary Jane, Gwen Stacy, Felicia Hardy, what the hell? I should have been a scientist. Oh yeah, that's right, I'm not very smart. Let's go to the DC side, where we got Selina Kyle, who first appeared in Batman #1 all the way back in 1940. She debuted in the same issue as the Joker. There have been multiple versions of her origin, but arguably the most popular one is that her mother rejected her for cats, and her dad was a drunk who abused her. This led young Selina to do gymnastics in her free time, and later she found her mother dead in the bathtub one night of an apparent suicide, and eventually her father drank himself to death. She then wound up on the streets after being institutionalized for a bit, just stealing to survive. Of course, Catwoman has a well-known on-again, off-again relationship with Batman/Bruce Wayne. However, in a 2018 comic, the two finally tied the knot. In our Wild Times Have Changed part of the program, creator Bob Kane claims that he chose the cat because women are cool, detached, and unreliable like feline creatures. Yikes, that dude really said that? Alright, so who ripped off who here? Who is more iconic? Well, Black Cat is predated by Catwoman by almost 40 years, so we're gonna have to give this one to Catwoman and DC in a landslide. Coming in at number 9 is Mr. Fantastic and Plastic Man. Both of these characters have elastic superpowers. Plastic Man is more of a villain type, whereas Reed Richards is like a clean-cut good guy. Plastic Man generally uses his powers to take on shapes and grows to being a giant, whereas Mr. Fantastic, who's probably less creative, just uses his stretching to stretch his limbs out. First appearing in Fantastic Four #1 back in 1961, Reed Richards Richards and the rest of the Fantastic Four were a response to the Justice League of America book that DC had put out, but Marvel wanted to take a slightly different approach. They did that with the Fantastic Four, as they were the first Marvel superheroes to not have a secret identity. Mr. Fantastic famously got his powers, along with the rest of the Fantastic Four, on a space excursion mission. They were hit by cosmic rays in a space storm, which gave them all their specific powers. Plastic Man, aka Patrick O'Brien, first appeared in Police Comics #1 in 1941. Like Reed, he can stretch his body into any imaginable forms. Unlike Reed Richards, who got his powers from cosmic rays in a space storm, Plastic Man came into contact with some kind of chemical mixture that got into his bloodstream and boom, stretching powers. So who ripped off who here? Well, technically, Plastic Man does predate Mr. Fantastic by 20 years, but they do seem to be pretty different in their various roles and abilities and the way they use them in their respective franchises. Plus the fact that Reed Richards was recently portrayed by John Krasinski, aka Jim Halpert, yeah, that helps. This round goes to Mr. Fantastic and Marvel. Coming in at number 8 is Hawkeye and the Green Arrow. Both of these guys are archers with sidekicks. Green Arrow wears green, whereas Hawkeye wears purple. In fact, they actually used to call him Purple Arrow at first. Source? I don't know, I guess I read it somewhere. What do you mean it's not true? Hawkeye, aka Clint Barton, first appeared in Tales of Suspense number 57 in 1964. He was introduced as an Iron Man villain working with Black Widow. He came from an abusive home and his parents died in a car accident. He later joined the circus and that's where he learned his archery skills. I wonder if he knew the Graysons. Of course, in the MCU, he becomes a highly skilled SHIELD agent who we meet in the first Thor movie at the Mjolnir crash site when Thor attempts to get his hammer back. But for me, he'll always be Hawkeye from the Matt Fraction run that included a personal favorite of mine, the Tracksuit Mafia. And no, they were not nearly as good in the show, bro. The Green Arrow, aka Oliver Queen, he first appeared in More Fun Comics number 73 back in 1941, and he was inspired by a series of books and movies called The Green Archer, so not really a stretch in naming him. He had a car similar to the Batmobile called the Arrow car, and yes, that is real, sadly. This is one way you can really distinguish him from Hawkeye because while he grew up rich, Hawkeye dirt poor. Oliver Queen was pushed off a boat by an employee where he had to survive on an island, and he made a bow for himself and used it to hunt and protect himself and just became really good with it. No circus for him. Alright, so who ripped off who? So Arrow predates Hawkeye by many years, right? And although it feels like the Green Arrow is somewhat of a Batman ripoff, it then feels like Hawkeye would be an even more bigger ripoff. Therefore, this round goes to DC and the Green Arrow. Coming in at number 7 is the Red Tornado and Vision. Both these guys are androids created by a supervillain by combining technology with some sort of cosmic entity and quickly became a key member of the big team on their respective franchise. Vision is way more overpowered than Red Tornado is, as his abilities lean a bit more towards like wind and tornado. Yeah, super fun abilities to have, right? Vision first appeared in Avengers number 57 back in October of 1968. He was created by Ultron to defeat Hank Pym, Ant-Man, and was the Vision of perfection. He's like Vigo! Ultron used the original Human Torch's body to make Vision, as the original Human Torch was a synthetic man named Jim Hammond. The Forever Crystal that powered Human Torch was split in two, and Ultron used one of its entities to create the Vision. Of course, the MCU changes this a bit. Vision's creator, Ultron, in the MCU is actually created by Tony Stark and Bruce Banner rather than Hank Pym, and he's powered by the Mind Stone instead of the Forever Crystal. The Red Tornado, meanwhile, first appeared in Justice League of America number 64 in 1968, just a few months before Vision's first appearance. He is an elemental in an android shell. He's made up of the Tornado Champion from Earth-1, planet Ran, inhabiting the body of an android created by supervillain Tomorrow. I hope I'm saying that right, because I pronounce things bad, and that's how it sounds in my head. This one's a tough one to decide who ripped off who. Red Tornado predates Vision by a couple of months, but that doesn't prove which one made it to the drawing board first. Vision has become a far more iconic character for Marvel than Red Tornado has for DC, and for that reason alone, I'm giving this round to Vision and Marvel. Coming in at number 6 is the Green Lantern Corps and the Nova Corps. That's right, I'm not even doing a single person here, we're doing like a whole group. So both of these groups are intergalactic police forces where one of their members is a recurring hero in the main story. With the Lantern Corps, we have the Green Lantern, we get a lot of different versions of them, and the Nova Corps, we get Nova. The Nova Corps first appeared in Fantastic Four number 205 in April of 1979 as a police force military space people, and they were an exploration group to the planet Xandar. Again, hope I'm saying that right. The source of the Nova Corps' power is called the Nova Force, which is an unlimited energy generated by a living computer called the Xandarian World Mind. The Green Lantern Corps first appeared in September of 1959 in Showcase 22. They're also an intergalactic law enforcement organization. Sound familiar? The source of their powers rests in a ring. So who ripped off who? So the Green Lantern Corps has been around about 20 years longer than the Nova Corps. I'd say it's pretty safe to say that DC and the Lantern Corps take this one. Coming in at number 5 is the Atom and Ant-Man. Both of these dudes have the ability to shrink down to an atomic and subatomic level. Hank Pym first appeared in 1962 in Tales to Astonish number 27. He became Ant-Man after his first wife, Maria, who was a political dissident, was murdered by corrupt agents in Hungary. That murder caused him to devote the rest of his life to fighting injustices, and soon after, he discovered the Pym particle, which would give him the ability to change the size of his atomic structure. In other words, he could get tiny, or he could get huge. Pym created a suit and a helmet with the ability to communicate with ants and control them, hence Ant-Man. On the DC side, the Atom first appeared in All-American Comics number 19 in 1940, but he had a much bigger debut in Showcase Comics number 34 in 1961. The original Atom, the 40s version, was a guy named Al Pratt, and he was a geek-turned-tough guy who was one of the founding members of the Justice League of America, and he had mild superpowers and atomic punch. The 60s version was Ray Palmer, who was a PhD scientist who messed with physics and stuff. Palmer discovered some white dwarf star matter that had fallen to Earth and created a lens that allowed him to shrink objects to a subatomic size. Unfortunately, the objects always ended up exploding after shrinking. Luckily, he eventually perfected the tech and created a belt buckle that would allow him to control the shrinking and resizing effect. Sound kind of familiar there? On the surface, it appears that DC beat Marvel to the punch here. Even if Ant-Man is more well known at this point, it's clear that the 60s version of the Atom, at least, really is the first shrinking and growing superhero. So we're giving this one to DC and the Atom. Coming in at number 4 is Superman and Hyperion. These dudes' powers are pretty similar. They both have super strength, super speed, flight, super durability, heat vision, among other things. Superman gets his powers from a yellow sun, whereas Hyperion gets his from cosmic radiation. I'm not a scientist, but that's almost the same thing. Hyperion first appeared in Avengers number 69. He came to Earth as a baby, sent as the only survivor of a race of Eternals from a dying world. This sounds familiar. A human father raised him under the name of Marcus Milton, teaching him the morals of society. Meanwhile, Superman first appeared in Action Comics number 1 in 1938. He was also born on a fictional planet, this one named Krypton, and he was named Kal-El. As a baby, his parents sent him to Earth in a spaceship moments before Krypton was destroyed. He was similarly found and adopted, this time by farmers Jonathan and Martha Kent, who named him Clark and raised him in the Midwest with Midwest morals. Yep, if you can't tell, this one's a no-brainer. Marvel clearly and unapologetically ripped off DC with the 30-year difference in age, and Superman is the far more iconic character. Hyperion just comes off as a ripoff. Most casual fans don't even know who it is. So yeah, this one goes to Superman and DC. Coming in at number 3 is Thanos and Darkseid. To be clear, we're talking comic Thanos here, not MCU Thanos. They're pretty different. Because if you didn't know, Thanos' motivation in the comics is quite different. You see, he loves Mistress Death, he's in love with her, and he wants to impress her, so he wants to destroy everything. Darkseid, meanwhile, wants to end life in general and throughout the universe. I guess Darkseid don't need no lady telling him what he wants. Thanos first appeared in The Invincible Iron Man number 55 in 1973. Co-creator Jim Starlin admits to having drawn inspiration from Jack Kirby's New Gods series for DC Comics, particularly the character of Darkseid. Thanos was born on Saturn's moon Titan, and he is the son of Eternals. His powers include super strength, invulnerability, immortality, and he's pretty much invulnerable to psychic attacks. Sorry, Professor X. Oh, and he's pretty much unstoppable once he gets the Infinity Stones. Darkseid's first appearance came via cameo in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen number 134 in 1970. Now you notice I'm saying Darkseid even though it says Darkseid. Jack Kirby himself says it's Darkseid, folks, so I'm saying it right. Darkseid is a renowned villain, having ranked number 6 as the greatest comic book villain of all time by IGN, and he's 23rd as the greatest villain ever, like of anything, by Wizard Magazine. Prepare for name butchering. Prince 𝐒𝐤𝐥𝐥𝐿, the son of King Yuga Khan and Queen Hegra, and the second in line to the throne of Apocalypse, plotted to seize control over the planet from his older brother Drax. No, not that Drax, a different Drax. The not Marvel Drax then attempted to claim the fabled Omega Force. However, 𝐒𝐤𝐥 murdered him and claimed the power for himself. His skin turned to stone, and he rechristened himself a much easier name, Darkseid. So you can probably guess who I'm going to give this one to. So considering that Jim Starlin admits his inspiration for Thanos is Darkseid, it's pretty clear who this round goes to, and that is DC and Darkseid. Coming in at number 2 is Quicksilver and The Flash. So these guys are both super speedsters. The Flash is more of an iconic hero type, whereas Quicksilver is somewhat of an anti-hero. Sometimes he's a bad guy turned good guy, then he goes bad guy, good guy, he can't decide. There's a lot of inner conflict. It's like Vader deciding if he's going to kill the Emperor. Quicksilver first appeared in X-Men number 4 back in March of 1964. He is the son of Magneto and twin brother to one Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch. He is a mutant and was part of the Mutant Brotherhood at one point and later the X-Men. He can run up to Mach 10 speeds and he can vibrate muscle extremely fast and destroy things with said vibration. Sometimes he can even jump into the future and appear to teleport and phase through objects. Meanwhile, the original Flash first appeared in Flash Comics number 1 in 1940. Now there has been at least 5 different people, each of whom somehow gained the power of the Speed Force, who assumed the mantle of the Flash in DC's history. All these different versions of the Flash get their powers from the Speed Force, and they are able to pass through walls and other things through a process called quantum tunneling. This dude is so fast traveling through time, not a problem, doesn't even need a DeLorean. The Speed Force also helps him heal quicker than a normal person, and he's even faster than Superman. The Flash predates Quicksilver by about 24 years, and he's definitely a much bigger, more important character in the DC universe than Quicksilver is in the Marvel universe. Although Quicksilver is one of the more interesting X-Men characters, we gotta give this round to DC and the Flash. Okay, time to go to number 1, and in my opinion, this one's the most egregious. Let's do it. Coming in at number 1 is Namor and Aquaman. I'll be honest, I can't look at either of these two guys without thinking of the Deep and wondering if they had a similarly special relationship with oceanic life. Peter would not like that. Both these guys are very similar in both powers and background. Namor, aka the Submariner, first appeared in Marvel Comics number 1 back in 1939. He is half human and half Atlantean, which makes him a mutant somehow. I don't totally understand that, but that's what they say he is. He is the sole heir to the Kingdom of Atlantis. A few years behind him in More Fun Comics number 73 is Aquaman. Aquaman is a founding member of the Justice League and eventually became the King of Atlantis. What do you know? Just like Namor, he's able to live under the water, he's able to breathe somehow, and he can communicate with sea life. Somewhat surprisingly, Namor is the clear winner here in terms of being the first one to have this kind of a role. That said, even though he's been the butt of a lot of jokes for a long time, Aquaman isn't just a cheap copy. He stood the test of time himself. But this one goes to Marvel and Namor. Alright, and our final score is DC, boop, Marvel, boop, making DC the winner. I've mentioned a few times throughout this video how some of these characters relate to their counterparts in the movies. To me, the most important part of bringing a comic book character to the big screen and getting the character right is the casting. Check out this video here where I count down the top 10 best comic book castings of all time according to me. And remember, you have to get old, but you don't have to grow up. Just be cool and stay nerdy. Later.